All right. Welcome, welcome. Hi, Sue. I'm glad that you're here. And for anyone that has joined, and as folks are joining, if you'll type in the chat where you are connecting in from, that would be awesome. Sue is coming from Highland, Indiana. I see Jenna is getting connected. And of course, we may have some other folks that continue to join us along the way. If you will type that in the chat, that would be great. I'm excited to be hosting this session today okay, Jenna is connecting in from New Mexico, which is awesome. All right. Well, we are going to go ahead and get started today. Today we're talking about how to actually help a widow. And we do have some widows that signed up for this event, and then we have some friends of widows that signed up. So I think you'll find the content relatable for both and helpful for both. So can you all see my screen okay? Are you having any issues with the screen, the sound, anything like that? Or does everything look good on your end? All good. Okay, awesome. Thank you. If I look to the side, that's just because that's where my chat and my Q&A screen are. So that's what's going on. So just a few housekeeping items. We're doing this via Zoom webinar. And part of the reason I wanted to do that is just to create a little bit more of an intimate setting so people don't feel like they're on camera. They don't feel like their names are out there, that people can feel like they can chat and tell me some personal or private things without feeling like everyone can read them. So, for all intents and purposes, you can just imagine it's just me and you here today. And I'm here to share with you what you can do to actually help a widow. And if you are a widow, how you can help others or how you can ask for help, which would be great. So at the bottom of your screen, you're going to notice a chat option, a chat button, which you've been using. So congratulations, good job. And you're also going to have a Q&A box. And the Q&A box is really helpful for you to enter your questions there just so they don't get lost in the chat. I really want this to be as interactive as possible between us. So, using the chat is great for comments, for sharing your thoughts. And I'm going to have several points along the way where you can share your thoughts of what comes to mind or what you're thinking. But if you have a question that you'd like me to answer or something that you really want to make sure that I hit on during our time together today, put that in the actual Q&A box so that way it doesn't get lost in the chat. It doesn't get lost as other people are joining and commenting in just kind of that flow of activity. If you put it in the Q&A, it's easier for me to go back and make sure that I answer that for you. So today, this is going to be your transformational guide into turning you into a super helping hero, which is what people want. And I'm going to talk a little bit about here in a moment about why this topic came up, why this is something that a lot of people have expressed interest in. But today, I'm just going to introduce myself. I'm going to go through the purpose of why we're having our discussion today. And then we're going to talk about the impact and what happens when someone becomes widowed. So I have several folks that have signed up that they're not personally widowed, but they're friends of a widow, or they have a support group that they run, and they just want to learn more about what it means to be widowed, about how they can help widows, which is awesome. So I'm going to do the best that I can in the short amount of time that we have together to explain what happens when you become widowed, which is the impact. Then we're going to navigate how you can actually help a widow and what are the things that you can do. That's one of the top questions that I get is what can I do to help a widow? It's as widows, we're very difficult to help, believe it or not. We don't think we are, but we are. Okay, and then what are some things that you can do to support longer term? So more than just those first few weeks. have time for Q&A, and then I also have some time set aside where I would love to tell you about the Brave Widow community and invite you to join us. And I do have a special bonus for you if you do join today or sometime during our call today that I would love to tell you about. So, how is this agenda looking? Is this meeting your expectations? Is this what you came for? How does this agenda look to you? Go ahead and type in the chat. Good. Okay, awesome. All right. Well, I am going to keep moving forward. So, let me introduce you to me. Who am I to speak about this topic? What do I know about being a widow? Well, here are several pictures of my family, at least my family up until July of 2021. So I was married to my very best friend, Nathan, for I put here in the middle 19.9 years. We were literally less than a month away from our 20th wedding anniversary. We have 4 beautiful kids together. At the time that he died in 2021, they were ages between 10 and 19. Now they are between the ages of 13 and almost 22, which, yes, does make me feel a little bit older. But these are some pictures of our family and of the past nearly 20 years of being a family. So my name is Emily, and I was widowed July 17th of 2021, less than a month before our 20th wedding anniversary. I was 37 years old, have these 4 awesome, amazing kiddos, and at the time, I was operating as a leadership executive. I had over 4,000 employees across over 100 hospitals, so I lived on the road. I was in an airplane, I was in the car, I worked long hours. I supported nurses and physicians and non-clinical teams, and that meant long hours. That meant being essentially on call at times when people needed help or had issues or we had something that needed to be addressed. So I lived a very fast paced, at times, sometimes wonderful, crazy lifestyle. And I was very blessed and spoiled because Nathan was my husband. He took care of the kids. He did all the cooking. He made sure the bills got paid. He took care of things around the house so that I could be freed up to be on the road and I could be freed up to focus on my career and balance that more easily with supporting the family, having a career, and just doing it all, at the time. So I lost Nathan unexpectedly to COVID complicated by pneumonia. In July, we had actually taken the week of July 4th off for vacation. We'd invited some friends to come stay with us during that time. And we had the great idea that we should go take a little trip the weekend before our vacation was going to start. So it was right at the end of June. We went to a city with a big theme park. And unfortunately, I think that may be where we contracted COVID. Now, during this time, I've been in and out of hospitals, I've been on airplanes, I've been running all over the country, never got majorly sick, never contracted COVID, even though I've been face to face with lots of patients and people and in all of that craziness that happened during that time. But this little vacation, as soon as we got back home, is where we really both started feeling sick. And when I say we had COVID, it was debilitating. It was, we were in the bed for unable to do much of anything for a couple of weeks. He ended up in ICU for 11 days. About half of that time, he was placed on a ventilator. And because I was getting over COVID and pneumonia myself, I wasn't allowed to go to the hospital. I wasn't really allowed to see him because our blood oxygen levels were so poor. It was difficult to breathe. It was difficult to talk. It was difficult really to stay awake. I remember every time I brushed my teeth, I had to go lay down and take a nap. Like every little thing was just exhausting. So that was really a very hazy, strange time for me. Those 2 to 3 weeks where we were sick, we were in the hospital, and one day I was called to the hospital, and the doctor set me down and said, "We think your husband may be brain dead." What? So I could go on about my story, but I fully understand in my own way, in my own experience, how in one instant your life can completely change. And I understand that there may be things about that event that haunt you for a long time. There are all kinds of emotions and feelings and processes that we go through. So, me being the go getter, overachiever, like get it done type person, I was like, how can I get through grief as fast as possible? Which, as we know, there's really no dedicated finish line, right? Like, there's no you've passed the finish line, you've healed, you're over grief, congratulations, great job, you've made it. But at the time, I didn't know that, I thought I was weird at 37 years old being widows. Widows were old, widows were, sad people, widows were not midlife, in the middle of a career, managing kids, doing all this stuff. Surely I was gonna be kind of the oddball, but I learned very quickly, as some of you may be laughing to yourselves, that all of these perceptions I had about grief and getting over grief and what a widow is and all of those things were not accurate. And I learned very quickly by spending thousands of hours reading books and getting certified and talking with other widows and hosting groups and coaching other widows that this journey is a lifelong journey at times. It doesn't mean that we live in debilitating grief the rest of our life. We shouldn't. We don't have to. We can still love our life. We can still find joy. But I had a lot of misconceptions about grief. And I felt called and compelled to create an environment for people to help them through this process. The pain and the loneliness were so great that I never wanted anyone else to feel like they had to go through this alone. So I founded Brave Widow, which I'll tell you about later if you're not familiar with that. I went to through the Faith-Based Coaching Academy as a 6-month program. We had, 9 to 10 hours of classes and coaching every week for 6 months. It was an amazing program where I got to learn how to help support other people, how to help coach other people, and then I became certified as a grief recovery specialist through the Grief Recovery Institute, which is amazing. If you've not read that book, if you've not gone through that program, I cannot recommend it enough. So, I have a question for you. I hope you're ready to type in the chat, 'cause here's our interactive point, one of them today. Why did you decide to join today? Like, what do you truly hope to walk away with out of our time that we have together today? And while you're thinking about maybe what exactly that looks like, I'm going to read some of the things that people said when they signed up. So, some of the thoughts that people had were they want to learn how to be a better support to their friend. And this person said specifically to my best friend, how to support people in the grief support group I co facilitate. Someone said they wanted ideas to help people out of their situation. That's one thing I love about the widow community is a lot of widows tend to want to help other people, which is awesome. Someone said how to tell people the things I need as a widow. And I had kind of thought about that when I put together this workshop, but I hadn't thought about fully how prevalent that is. That's really powerful. Tools to move forward, relief. And then here in the chat, I'm a widow looking for resources. It's a lonely road, and I don't know how to ask for help. As widows, we're really bad about asking for help and knowing how. So the good news is you're totally normal and you're gonna know how to ask for help by the end of this, which is awesome. And to someone said to be a better supporter of those going through losses. Yes. Yes. And just knowing how to get some relief. Awesome. Well, the good news is you are going to learn that during our time together today. So I am so glad that you're here. So, why does this workshop exist? Why did I put this together? Well, there is a dilemma, and you have already seen and experienced what this dilemma is. And the dilemma is, look at our person here on the very far left. We have a widow, and this widow is struggling, and she wants help and she needs help, but she's very hesitant to accept it if people offer it. And about 90% of the time, she won't ever ask for help, right? So you have this person that wants help, they need it, they hesitate to accept it, they're not gonna ask for it, and then we have the people who love us, who care for us. We have our friends, our family, people at church, people at work. We have this other group of people, they want to help, but the problem is they don't know how to help. They don't wanna step on your toes, they don't wanna intrude, they don't really know what to expect, they don't know, how to offer up help. So what ends up happening is you get people who are around you that may try to read your mind. They may feel like, "Oh, this is hopeless. I have no idea what you want. So I'm just going to say, let me know if there's anything I can do to help." And then I feel like I've checked the box as a good citizen and I've done my job to help you. Or I may bring you the frozen casserole, right? Or I may sign you up for a food train, which can be helpful. But there's a chasm of separation between the widow who wants help but struggles accepting it, doesn't know how to ask for it, and then the people who want to help, but just don't know how, don't know what to do, don't know. There's so much about grief that we just not educated on as a culture, but that's okay. We're going to help bridge the gap. So this leaves people with this feeling of, what do widows actually need? What can I do to actually help them? Why won't they let me help? I've offered for help. I've offered to do things and I keep getting told no and I keep getting shut down and I see this person struggling and I want to help, but they just keep rejecting me. So we're going to help clear up a lot of these thoughts and a lot of these struggles. So our purpose today is to bridge the gap between the widows who want help and need help and the people who want to help. Talk through the mindset and challenges that widows face of the reality of what happens. I have a list for you. So you are going to leave today. You'll get a link to a web page where you can watch the replay of this video. You can download a full list of ways to help widows. And I have some other resources that you can download, videos that you can watch, all for free that you can use to know like what it is that you can do to help other widows. And then we're going to talk just briefly about preparing others. So if you know someone who's in anticipatory grief or somebody who's newly married and maybe things they never thought about, like we never thought about, some things that you can do to help prepare others. Okay, reflection time. So type in the chat for me, what perceptions do you have about grief? Like, what do you know about grief? And you don't have to tell me everything you know, but what's something that you think you know about grief, or something you've been taught, or something that you hear people say all the time? Maybe you resonate with it, maybe you don't. But if you were to be asked, what do you know about grief? What's something that you would say? And go ahead and type that in the chat for me. Well, something in my eye. 5 stages of grief. Okay, yep. We see that a lot in the grief and widow community, so we're definitely going to talk about that. What else comes to mind with grief? Don't know much about it. Okay. Yep, perfectly fine. Okay. All right, so let's actually talk about the 5 stages. Okay, that you have to be over grief in a timeline and that they're stages. Yes. Okay. So, uh, this here, this visual, you may not be familiar with this exact visual, but you may be more familiar with the stages of grief, the 5 stages of grief. And here they are: denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance. And so, what I want you to do with this for a moment as you think about how it applies to a widow and as you're kind of looking at, well, it says denial is first. So if I'm angry, maybe I've moved to anger. What you may not know about these 5 stages of grief is it doesn't apply to widows. Just gonna let that sit for a minute. So we see this a ton in the grief community. This was actually developed by Elizabeth Kubler-Ross in the late 60s, and she created this model, which is a helpful model for people that are receiving a terminal illness or diagnosis and accepting their own death and mortality. So when people try to talk to you through the 5 stages of grief, or if you use the 5 stages of grief to say, "Where am I? Am I moving forward? Is something wrong with me? I've never gone through this bargaining phase," or "I've never cried in my grief. Am I broken? Is something wrong with me? Am I weird?" The answer is no, but it's confusing because this information gets pushed a lot in the grief and widow community as what we go through. And there's memes out there that say the reality, which is really we're bouncing all over the place, right? Our grief process. So just know that the 5 stages of grief, if it doesn't resonate with you, if you're not going through each of these stages, that guess what? You're normal because it was never meant for you. It was never meant to describe the process of a widow. And if you're not a widow, then please don't use this in looking at where a widow is in correlation to this. It doesn't apply to widows. All right. So as I thought about some of the simplest ways that I could help people understand what impact really happens when someone is widowed, I have a few questions for you. And before you answer them, I would like for you to take a moment and close your eyes. And if you're not married, if you've ever been married, think about maybe that time. If you're a widow, you probably already know the answer to all these questions and fully understand what it means to have been widowed. So, this exercise, everyone can participate in, but I want to help illustrate for people who haven't experienced widowhood what that might be like or how disruptive that may be. So, for a moment, close your eyes. And I want you to imagine that you're just waking up in the morning. Your alarm's going off. You're just waking up. Maybe you have to get ready for work. Maybe you have to get ready and get the kids for school. But you look over to the side and you see somebody next to you. Who is that person? You go about your day, you go to work, take the kids to school, do what you do during the day. You come home, you're coordinating dinner plans, and who is the person that typically you're coordinating dinner plans with or you're coordinating kids logistics with? And then think about those few hours in the evening. Maybe you're unwinding, maybe you're having dinner, maybe you are watching YouTube, funny videos on the couch, whatever that is. Your person, your spouse is present in a lot of those moments. Think about the moment when you know it's time to go to bed. Like, what is your routine? Does your person come to you and say, "Hey, all right, it's 10 o'clock. I'm going to bed," or "It's time to go to bed"? Do you both brush your teeth at the same time? Do you stay up late and watch TV while they go to bed? Just think about all of these routines that happen when you're married and you have such a close-knit relationship. You know, so many times people describe marriage as two people becoming one. They describe their partner as being their other half. And we recognize how true this is when we're widowed and that person is instantly taken away from us. Like when we're married, we typically feel close, we feel intimate, we feel very near to that person, but until you lose that person, it's hard to imagine what it's like not having them there. It's hard to realize how intermingled and intermeshed your life has become. So, okay, you can open your eyes now. And this picture is really just an illustration of two people together in a relationship, married, doing life together. And one of the reasons why grief is so hard is because when you're married, everything changes. It's not just, "Oh, I lost my person, they're no longer here." There are downstream impacts that we're gonna talk about, there are a lot of secondary losses that happen, but everything about your day changes, okay? So now let's visualize what a day looks like, especially when you've recently lost a spouse. I didn't sleep well the night before. I'm gonna tell you my story in those first few weeks and months of being a widow, okay? And keep in mind, I was married to my spouse for a really long time, more than half of my life at the time. I was married and had habits and routines with my person. I wake up in the morning, I look over, oh yeah, he's not there. I get up, I go to the bathroom to use the bathroom, brush my teeth. I see his toothbrush still there on the counter, even though it's been a few weeks. I haven't really found the energy to throw it away. Oh, yeah, he's no longer here. I get ready, I go to get the kids ready, I go to grab my keys, I see his car there. Oh, yeah, he's not here. Every little thing about a widow's life changes. What she eats, when she goes to bed. I used to go to bed at 10 o'clock every night, and I found myself starting to ask myself, well, why? Is it because we did that together? Is it because I felt like that's when I needed to go to bed? But there's no longer that person saying, hey, it's 10 o'clock, let's go to bed. Or, hey, we need to get ready for bed, or we got to get up early in the morning. Like every little interaction is different. One of the things that Nathan and I used to do together at night on the nights that I was home and I wasn't traveling is we would save up funny little videos, whether it was on TikTok or YouTube or memes or whatever. And the last 30 minutes of the evening, like just to decompress, we would lay down and we would share videos with each other of something that we found that was funny. And when I was traveling, if I found one that was just really funny, then I would forward it to him, right then. I wouldn't wait till I got back home. And I can't tell you the number of times that I would see something that was kind of funny or reminded me of him, and I would go to hit forward, and I would have to go, "Oh, wait," and just feel all the sadness, like, bubbling back up, like, I can't send it to him. He's not gonna see this video. He's never gonna see this video. He's not here for me to laugh with about this, when I would be traveling for work and I'd make it to the hotel, I'd pick up the phone to text him like, "Hey, made it to the hotel," and I'd have to put my phone back down. So, although it's incredibly hard to imagine, when you are widowed and when you experience this, there are 1,000 reminders throughout the day that your person is gone, that your life is not gonna be the same, that all the habits and the routines you had before are subject to change, and that in some cases, it just feels like things are pointless or hopeless because you don't have your person there to share those things with. Now, as widows lose their person, then there are a bunch of other losses, which are called secondary losses, that they also experience that a lot of people don't think of. This image specifically came from Modern Widows Club, but there's a lot of information out there about this. So, especially for widows, when you lose your spouse, you lose a lot of things, or you can have lost a lot of things. So I was very fortunate in being the person who was the breadwinner. A lot of widows are not this fortunate. A lot of widows have a big change to their income. Maybe that was their only source of income was their spouse. So now they either have to go to work for the first time, they have to go back to work, they have to pick up more hours, they have to figure out a new job. They have to evaluate, can they still live in their house? Can they still afford it? Do they need to get an apartment? Do they need to move back in with their parents? I know lots of young widows. I've talked with them that had to move back in with their families because their spouse was the person who worked. And they woke up one day and no longer had that stability, that financial security, that source of income, and nothing. So on top of having lost your spouse, then you have to consider how you live. Can you afford the same lifestyle? Can you afford the same car? Can you stay in the same home? Or do you have to also change all those other things that are additional stressors and are additional disruptors to your life? You lose one thing I think that's so underrated is you lose your thinking partner. So you lose the person that helped you think about, is this a good decision? You know, should I buy this one or that one? Should I change who provides life insurance? You know, what kind of car should we get? You know, how should I discipline the kids? So if one of my kids is struggling, you know, how should I discipline them? If they're starting to date, what rules are going to be about dating? Like all those little decisions that you would talk about with your spouse, or you would kind of get another perspective on, or get someone's to weigh in on, all of a sudden that person's no longer there for you to bounce ideas off of. So you've lost that. You lose your identity. So I've been a wife and a mom for over 20 years. Now who am I? Am I still married? Am I not married? I feel kind of like I'm married and I want to wear my rings, and other times I feel not married and I want to take my rings off. And you know, I knew very much what my dreams for the future were. Like I'm a planner, I have my life planned out. And, I knew what I wanted to do when I retired, and all of a sudden, I had to step back and say, "Okay, I know who I was, my identity in that relationship with Nathan. I know what our social circle looked like, I know what our dreams for the future were, but I don't even feel like the same person anymore. I don't know if I still wanna do those things anymore, if I still wanna have those dreams for the future. Do I still care about doing some of those things? Not if it's just me. I wanna do it by myself. Some things maybe, but, you know, do I wanna have 100 acres and cows and horses and everything else by myself? No, that's a lot of work. So, there are a lot of things that widows lose in addition to just being sad about their spouse and having lost their spouse. Oftentimes, widows lose their social circle. They lose the group of people that are around them, that support them, that show up for them. Many times that changes. They could have lost their faith. So, if they're a person of faith, typically your faith becomes stronger, or you really start to struggle with it. So, all of these things are things that widows lose in addition to just having lost their person. So I don't know if it's as obvious to you as it is to me when I look at these two pictures, but the picture on the left was a few months before Nathan had died. Actually, this was around Christmas, so this would have been about 7 months before he died. And the picture on the right was my daughter's birthday, which was just like 2 or 3 years before 2 or 3 years, 2 or 3 days after Nathan's funeral was her birthday, and we still try to do a little party for her. But when I look at the face of myself on the right, like, I can just see the pain, I can see the smile that doesn't reach my eyes, I can see my hair that had already started to fall out, and a few months later, I would have lost almost all my hair from the trauma of being sick and grieving and all of that at once. My oldest son also lost a lot of his hair. I can see just somebody going through the motions because I wanted my daughter to have a good birthday and because I didn't want her to always attach her dad's death to her birthday. But I can see the pain. And for many widows, they will tell you that losing your spouse changes you as a person. You're no longer fully the person that you were before, which is a very odd and bizarre feeling and hard to explain, but it's true. Widows often gain this thought and this sense of feeling of what does it matter? So, for example, as I'm going through my day and I think about bills that need to be paid, I think about, the funny little videos that would come across my screen. I think about my dreams for the future. I always have this thought in the back of my mind like, well, what does it matter? Nathan's not here. What does it matter if I can ever laugh again? What does it matter if I accomplish a big goal? In fact, I accomplished a really big life goal. It was less than a year after he died. And I really struggled with that because, on one hand, I should have been sky high, happy, elated, like I had worked so hard for this thing to come to fruition, and it did. And he wasn't there to see it. He never would be. So, what does it matter? And so many widows really struggle with being able to get out of this vicious cycle of I want to have a life, I want to have dreams. I don't want to live the rest of my life sad and depressed, but what does it matter? If he's not here to enjoy it, then it's pointless. So, this is just for your awareness of thoughts and mentality that's very common for widows, especially early on. Then you could tell I got a little teary eyed there. You can also uh, have this experience that people call brain fog. And if you've ever been a person that, if you've ever had a newborn, okay, and with a newborn, especially those first couple 2 to 3 weeks, unless you're incredibly blessed, those first few weeks with a newborn, you kind of feel like a zombie, right? Like you're waking up every 1 to 2 hours. You're stressed, your body's trying to recover. You don't really have predictability in your schedule. You can't really think clearly. You can't get one full night's sleep. Like you never really feel rested. You kind of feel detached or disassociated. That's probably the closest thing that I could relate grief brain fog to, because it truly is living in a fog, or as Susan Ford Collins wrote a book called Blur, it's like living in this blurry haze. And on one hand, I did try to find the humor in it, although it was not at the time, because at the time it was super frustrating. But what this is like is my husband, Nathan, had diagnosed ADHD, and he was constantly forgetting stuff. He constantly misplaced stuff. He never could remember. I was like reminding him constantly for everything. We lived and died by reminders on his phone, by me putting stuff together so he could remember it. And I always, especially at first, I got super annoyed. Like, why can't you just remember why do I have to remind you every little thing? This is really annoying. But I loved him. I learned more about his condition and we managed in life. But I could never really fully appreciate what a struggle that was for him until I went through this brain fog and I understood. I would catch myself. One time I caught myself walking with hand soap from the bathroom into my office and set it down and having to go, "Well, what am I doing? Why did I bring this in here?" Um, I remember early on after Nathan died, I had sat down and I pulled out all the important papers, car titles, home, deed to our home, all the important papers. I had organized them and put them in stacks. And when I went to meet with my attorney about the estate, I couldn't find my car titles anywhere. Not anywhere. I dug through my trash. I went through every folder, every piece of paper, one by one by one. I spent hours trying to find these car titles. I did not find them. And I finally just gave up and thought, I must have thrown them away. I don't know what happened. I just gave up. A year later, you wanna know where I found them? I had stuck them in the kitchen, which is across my house from where my office is, in a random silverware drawer I never use because it's the nice silverware that has to be hand washed, and so, we don't tend to use that very often, and I shoved them in the back of that silverware drawer. Now, why? Why had I done that? Why had I taken them in there? What was I thinking? Why was I even carrying them around by themselves? Who knows? But you do all kinds of things when you've got this crazy brain fog going on. It's very difficult to remember anything. It's very difficult to stay organized. I would break down and cry multiple times trying to do things like maintenance the lawnmower, run the grill, do things around the house I'd never done before because I would watch these YouTube videos on how to do something and I'd have to watch them over and over and over because it was so hard to focus. It was so hard to watch how to do something and then go and do it. It was like I needed one little baby step at a time. So, as widows are grieving, especially in those first few weeks and months, this is one of the biggest challenges they have. And it's important that you know this because we're going to talk about later how this impacts their ability to ask for help and their willingness to accept help. So, common emotions that widows will experience that are very strong, especially early on, a feeling of hopelessness. Things are pointless. You're a hollow, empty shell just floating through life. Like, life is happening around you, life is moving forward, and how dare it move forward? Your world and your life has just been totally disrupted. How dare everyone else just experience life and move forward as if nothing happened? You may feel like you're drifting, and for me, that was one of the most unnerving experiences that I had. Like, I'm a planner. I know where I'm at, I know where I'm going, I know I have, goals and dreams and things that I wanna accomplish, and for the first time, all of those things evaporated. And as I'll show you in a moment, I just felt like I was just floating, just aimlessly floating, just moving through life, just going through the motions and feeling like, I mean, what is the point? Now, what now? I'm 37, I'm widowed. I have, maybe another 40, 50 years to live and I'm supposed to live it without my person? Really? Like those are the types of emotions that plagued me early on and plague many widows. So common thoughts that they have, what does it matter? He isn't here anymore. One thought I had all the time is, "How is this possible? Like, how is this possible? How did this happen to me? How is it possible he was in the hospital?" Like, the hospital is where they heal people. I work with hospitals. I've been in healthcare 20 years. I love doctors and nurses and hospitals, and they save people's lives. People don't go there to die. I was relieved he went to the hospital. He was gonna be fine. He was in good hands. How did this happen? I don't wanna live without him. I don't want to. I don't wanna live the rest of my life without him. Why did this happen to me? I've met so many other people with similar circumstances, and that person lived and my person didn't. Why? I also struggled a lot with guilt. Guilt is very common. We'll talk a little bit about that later on too. I felt guilty for things that were left unsaid, for things that happened before he went to the hospital. You know, men get the man flu, right? Like men exaggerate how bad they feel when they're not feeling good, and women just have to tough it out. So I had a little bit of sympathy for Nathan, but not a lot. And in my own words, as I told him, I'm sick too. We're both sick. I'm sick. You're sick. We're both sick. So there are many things that I looked back on for a long time and felt very guilty about. I don't anymore. So there's hope if you're struggling with that. Widows engage in survival mode. What has to get done? Who has to be notified? How do I do this thing now that I've never had to do? So my husband cooked, he paid the bills, he took care of things. We live on nearly a 40-acre property that has to be managed and maintained. I've never done any of that. This was his dream property and I love it, but I didn't sign up to take care of it. I didn't sign up to take care of the dog outside of getting these kids to school back and forth and all their activities after school. Now I have to figure out, all the passwords, all the accounts, all the, how to plan out meals, going and getting groceries, things that Nathan, I was very fortunate Nathan did all that. Now I have to figure it out. Then I have to figure out where I put stuff. Where are things around this house? If I didn't put it up, I have no idea. So a lot of widows get into this survival mode and they're just going through the motions. They're just going through the motions. They're just trying to survive. And it's important that you know that because it's easy to make assumptions about what a person is thinking or what they're going through when you don't understand that really they're just in the survival mode and they're oftentimes people feel like they're drowning in grief and the water is like right here up to their eyeballs and they're just doing everything they can to keep their head above water while at the same time asking themselves why bother. So it's just important to understand that from a mindset perspective. So this is the best visual I could find. I still didn't feel like it was powerful enough, but for me, going through all of these emotions and feelings and trying to learn new stuff and trying to deal with grief and trying to deal with my kids' grief and make sure they were okay. And now having felt like all my dreams, all my plans, everything that was important to me gone, I felt like I was just bobbing up and down in this huge ocean and these big waves were coming and it was storming and there would be periods of time where I'd feel like, okay, I'm treading water. It's exhausting. Living in grief every day is exhausting. Just surviving, just getting out of bed. Every small task takes so much energy. And this is really explained beautifully in the chronic illness community. They talk a lot about the spoon theory or how much energy something takes that people take for granted when you have a chronic illness or you're in a grieving state. You only have so much energy, and things that used to come easy to you, things that used to be natural and you never really thought about now take so much energy to do. And that's what it's like in grief. You're just treading water, treading water, treading water. And about the time that you feel like, okay, this storm has passed, it's calmed down, I'm starting to get my head above water, another wave crashes down on you and feels like it just pushes you back under the water and you've got to fight, 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 fight to get back up. That's what it's like living every day in grief and just trying to survive and just trying to figure out where am I? Where am I going? I see no sign of help. I see no sign of hope. All is lost. All I know is I've got these 4 kids over here that they're trying not to drown too. So I got to help them not drown and take care of myself in the meantime. So this is just reiterating why grief is so complicated. It's not just what I thought, which is like, oh, if Nathan ever died, I would miss him. I would miss my person. I would be sad. Yeah, that's true. Those things are all true. But all these other things are happening too. You have this new identity you're trying to figure out. You have all these secondary losses that now have impacted you in your day-to-day life. And now you're trying to figure out this new role Your role in society has changed, your role in life has changed, and you're trying to just figure all this out, which makes it super complicated. We also have some unique challenges that different widows face. And um, as we talk about unique challenges that people have, we never want to play the comparison game in grief, right? So somebody could say, well, I'm an older widow. I was married for 40 years. My pain is greater than yours. Somebody could say, well, I was only married to my spouse for 2 years and now I have the whole rest of my life ahead of me. You got to love your spouse longer than I got to love my spouse. You got the time that I didn't get. Nobody wins when we're comparing in grief. Pain is pain. But I do want to illustrate some unique challenges different widows have because they have unique things that they're navigating. And I'm going to start with young widows, but there are a couple of different categories that I want to point out. Doesn't mean that their journey is harder or more painful or should be revered more than anyone else's, but they are things that people don't tend to think about. So, for widows who are younger, and the average age of a widow now is 59 is the latest, which 59 seems very young to me. I thought widows were like 80 and 90. I used to always think, widows are like 90 years old and they've lived a good life and they were married for like 60 years and, it's expected, right? I had no idea the average age of a widow is 59, which seems like way too young for me. But we talk about specifically young widows, then we have this interesting dynamic where they are grieving the future as much as the past. So you have a widow in her 20s or 30s, let's say. Maybe she only got to be married for 2 years, 5 years, 10 years. Now she's 25, now she's 30. What about the rest of her next 30, 40, 50 years? It's a long time ahead of her that feels very much unknown. She's grieving all of those years. Her husband will never be a grandfather. Her husband won't walk her daughter down the aisle. All of those things that many people get to experience, she will never get to experience with her person. So there's this not well understood grieving about the future that happens when you're in such an early stage of life. You also have the challenges of parenting as a solo parent. And some people might say, well, at least you have your kids. That's great. They keep you going. And other people like me feel like it would be easier without my kids because I wouldn't have to focus on them and worry about them. And, I could just be by myself, which I tend to be. That's my coping mechanism is being by myself and hibernating. So, we all think someone else has a simpler, easier journey than we do. Um, you also have somebody, if they're not retired, they gotta work, they gotta take care of the home, they gotta take care of the family, they gotta figure out a source of income. And then, you get some of the statements to people like, "Oh, you're young, you'll find somebody new." Almost like, "Oh, don't worry about it. You're 25, like you got plenty of time to find someone new." Okay, well, as a widow, I don't want anyone new. I want my person back. I'm not even thinking about finding somebody new. There are also challenges that widows face when they lose their spouse to things like suicide, overdose, or other types of death that come with a lot of stigmas. So, someone who loses a spouse to suicide or overdose, typically people make, I'll just call them crappy comments. That's what they are, judgmental comments. And I'll actually share a story. I was referred someone who was going to speak at a funeral, and it was actually her boss's son who committed suicide. And he had a wife and children, and he had his whole future ahead of him. He had an amazing, beautiful future waiting for him in his career and in life. And the person that reached out to me or that was referred to me was really struggling with what to say because he had committed suicide and she didn't believe in that. She didn't believe that if you commit suicide that you would go to heaven. She believed it was a very selfish act. She believed that she had a lot of judgments about suicide. And so she felt very conflicted because her boss asked her to speak at this funeral, but what was she gonna say? She didn't wanna say he was in a better place. She didn't wanna say anything nice about this guy because she had all these thoughts about this guy and all the reasons why he shouldn't have done this and it was wrong, and she had all of her judgments. So I talked to her about that, and finally, at the end of our conversation, she's asking me, "Well, I mean, what do I do? What do I say? I don't wanna say something that's not in alignment with how I feel." And so what I told her was, the words that you say at the funeral aren't for this guy. They're not. Yeah, it's his funeral, but the words you have for them aren't for him. The words that you have to share are for the people who are left behind. And the people who are now caught up in the aftermath, his wife, his children, his mother, his family, who don't understand this, who have their own feelings about it. And they don't need your opinion. They don't need your thoughts. They don't need you to weigh in on how you feel about it and what he should and shouldn't have done. And, you know, if they want to ask you, I'm not saying you shouldn't give your opinion, maybe, but when you're in a funeral and you're going to talk to everyone, you're talking to the people who are left behind. Like, there's nothing good that can come out of you speaking ill or negatively about your beliefs. Who cares about your beliefs? And maybe in a way, how you start your words at the funeral are by saying, the words I have today are for the loved ones that sit in front of me. I'm here for you. I can't imagine your pain. I will support you every way that I can. We need to surround these people with love and support and just an outpouring of being there for them. The words don't have to be about your opinion. And, that between that and talking with so many other widows, this is something that they struggle with, is that unfortunately people don't keep their opinions to themselves. Or people, kind of have these judgy thoughts like, well, they did it to themselves or they did it to their family, or, well, you knew he was struggling with addiction. Why didn't you leave him? Then you wouldn't be so sad. Like, none of that matters. What matters is that the person that's left behind is in the aftermath and they're hurting. They really don't care about your opinion about what happened with their spouse and all those other things. What they care about is, are you going to show up for them? Do you love them? Are you going to help support them? Those are the things that are important. So those are unique struggles that widows who have lost a spouse to those situations go through. We also have widows that go through anticipatory grief. And, I used to always wonder, would it be better to know? And so anticipatory grief, if you're not familiar with that, basically is when your spouse receives a terminal diagnosis. Like, we all know we're going to die. We know we should know that we're going to die, but we're not all given a timeline. So we think about it differently, right? But if somebody's given a timeline, whether it's 6 months or 5 years or whatever that is, then the widow is in anticipatory grief, which is she's grieving the impending loss of her spouse, but she may also be in denial and be holding on. I had somebody on the podcast that was very clear in saying, I thought we were going to be one of the 1%, like we were going to make it. Like, it never occurred to me, even though everyone said this is going to happen, it never occurred to me that we weren't going to make it. And it's so common, and we think that wouldn't be us, but it very well could have been, could be. You have people that weren't married yet. Maybe they were engaged. Maybe they were in a long-term relationship. Maybe they were in the process of getting a divorce or they had just gotten divorced. And there are struggles there. If you're not married to someone, your rights in many states are very limited, which means you may not have rights to their estate. You may not have rights to say how their funeral goes. You may not have rights to the headstone, to anything. if you weren't married to that person. Or if you were divorced or in the process of getting divorced, then people might mitigate your pain, like, "Oh, well, you were getting divorced anyway. What are you upset for? Aren't you you're probably just glad you don't have to go through that process." I mean, people say the craziest things to widows, which blows my mind. You also have relationships with the in-laws, and in my case, I'm very blessed. My in-laws and I came very close together. They're just like my parents. I love those people. They're amazing. But in many cases for widows, it's a battle with the in-laws, and the in-laws say very hurtful things. Sometimes they want to continue a relationship, sometimes they don't. Sometimes they want to see their grandkids, sometimes they don't. It Sometimes they put things out there that, "Hey, if you still want our inheritance because our son has died, then you will abide by all of these rules," which puts widows in a tough situation. They also may have a complicated grief or strained relationship. So maybe their relationship with their spouse wasn't the best. Maybe their spouse was abusive emotionally, verbally, physically. Maybe they were on the verge of getting a divorce. Maybe they never felt loved by their spouse. That creates another complication of, wow, I'm relieved, say somebody who's in an abusive relationship. I'm relieved I don't have to live through that every day, and I'm so sad that he's gone. And just because we don't understand it or we haven't experienced it doesn't mean that it's not something that people may struggle with. So, these are just things to be aware of or to look for where widows really may struggle in addition to just having lost their person. This is why this whole grief thing can be so complicated. All right. So what can you actually do to help? You wanna help? Which, by the way, let me just say thank you. Thank you for being here today, whether it's for yourself or to help other people or to advocate for help or because you want to support another widow. Like, that is just amazing that you are here and that you want to help. If a widow needs help, won't she just ask for it? No. No. In fact, that's why some of you are here today because you're like, I don't ask for help. I don't know how. I don't know what to say. I don't know what to ask for. So I would say out of all the widows I've worked with and talked to, um, 95-ish% of the time, they're never going to ask for help. Not at all. Okay, so why not? Well, first of all, we talked about the brain fog. We talked about all those thoughts and emotions. We talked about the fact that she's in survival mode. So remember that she's not thinking clearly. Her brain is all over the place. Every day may be a struggle, and she's not thinking as she normally would be. Okay. So maybe she has trouble coming up with ideas. She doesn't know what to ask for. She also doesn't know what you can do or will do, okay? Maybe she needs a hole patched in her wall. Maybe one of the kids slammed open a door and knocked a hole in the wall. Well, she doesn't know if you can fix that hole. How will she know? She doesn't know if you're willing to mow her lawn. Maybe you have bad seasonal allergies and you don't wanna mow the lawn. She, doesn't wanna ask you to wash her dirty underwear. She's not gonna do that. So, she doesn't know what you can do and what you will do, what you're happy to do, right? So, she doesn't really know what to ask you. She's also afraid that you're gonna think less of her. Like, "Oh, Emily, lost her husband, 4 kids. She's struggling. She's asking people for help. Oh, she's put up a GoFundMe. Oh my gosh." She's afraid that if she asks for help, you're gonna think less of her. This one is totally me. She feels like it's simple and she just should be able to do it. Like, why should I have to ask for help with dusting my house? It's easy. I can do it. Like, I feel stupid asking. I feel silly asking for help with something like that. She's embarrassed to have to ask for things. She feels weak. She thinks that you're just being courteous, like you're just being nice, but you're not actually like really offering to help. It's just that polite, check the box. Like, I did my good deed as a good citizen of the universe by saying that I would help, but I don't actually mean I'm going to roll up my sleeves and help. Okay. She doesn't want to be a burden to you. And, she may be afraid to rely on anyone else. She relied so much on her person. And she's afraid of the letdown if she asks you to help or she asks someone to help and you say no or you can't do it or something comes up or it's going to inconvenience you. Like, she's afraid to have to rely on someone else to help her and do those things. Okay, time for the chat. Let's think about when someone that you know is hurting or crying. Like, you walk in a room, you see your child crying, or you have somebody that's telling you something really hard, they're crying, they're hurting, they're really upset. What are some things that you typically do to help them? Go ahead and think about it for a minute and type that in the chat. Sorry, I have something in my eye. Okay, yes. Okay. Mm. I hug them. I try to soothe them. I sit with them and listen. Good, yes. I always think it's interesting that when we see someone hurting, we see someone crying, we see them upset. What do we want to do? We want to fix it. We want to make it better. We want to make them feel better. We want to soothe them. We want to reassure them it's going to be okay. We want to, like, it sometimes makes us really uncomfortable to sit with someone while they're upset. And so we want to like really soothe them and fix it and make it all better, right? Like, we want them to be positive and to feel better about it. And that's a very natural and normal response. It's also, sometimes why men and women have some friction because as women, sometimes we don't want men to fix our problems, you know? We've had a bad day, we gone through an experience, and we're upset, and we just wanna talk about it, and our person was, like, trying to fix it, giving us suggestions, giving us advice, like, trying to fix it. It's like, "Why can't you just listen? Like, I don't need you to solve the problem, I just need you to listen." Um, so I always think about that analogy as well. So I have some bad news for you about being able to help the person who is hurting. But the bad news is also the good news. So the bad news is you can't fix it. The bad news is there's no words you can say to, like a magic wand, make them feel better, to take away the pain, to um, heal them, to fix their life for them. There's nothing you can do that, okay? That's the bad news. But the good news is there's nothing you can do to fix it. So you do not own the responsibility of making them feel better. You do not own the responsibility of following all the steps to fix their life, to take away their pain, to solve all their problems for them. That is not your job and your responsibility. It's not, because you can't do it. It's not possible. The number one thing that you can do for a widow is to be there. And I'm going to talk about several different examples of this and things that you can do to be there for a widow and what that means, because it can look like a lot of different things. But I want you to remember, if you remember nothing else, the number one thing you can do for a widow is to be there. So, as one of our folks mentioned, listening, being there for them and listening is one of the most powerful things that you can do for a widow is to listen and to be present. How often are we talking with someone and we're telling them maybe it's something good. Maybe we're telling them about a vacation that we just came back on, and we're like, "Oh, I just went on this trip. We had so much fun. It was great." And how fast is the other person to redirect the conversation to them and to say, "Oh, yeah, I went to Florida. I've been to Orlando before. I actually took this trip and I did da 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 da." And it takes away from your excitement and what you wanted to share. Or how about when you're trying to share, like, "Oh, it's been really hard. I miss my person so much." And the other person says, "Yeah, I'm divorced. I know how you feel." Or, "Yeah, my aunt died a couple years ago, and that was really hard for me too." People are very quick to take the topic and to take the conversation and redirect it back to themselves. Now, a lot of times it's not malicious. A lot of times people do it because they want to connect with you. They want you to know, like, "Oh, yeah, me too. Like, I get that. Yeah, I feel you. Like, I understand. I get that." But that doesn't help us feel better. And sometimes it helps us feel worse. So, what you can do for a widow, first of all, is to listen. Just be quiet. Just listen, listen, listen. Let them talk without judging them. Whatever they say, just let them get it out, okay? And be willing to ask questions about their person. Be curious. If they're talking about their person, then ask them, like, "Oh, well, tell me more about that." Or, "What were some of the things that you guys enjoyed doing together?" Widows think that people get tired of hearing them talk about their person, talk about death, talk about sadness, talk about, they don't really get a chance very often to talk about their person and they want to. So listen and ask them questions that would help encourage them to talk about their person and to let them know that you genuinely want to know. You're not tired of hearing about it. You wanna learn everything you can about this person and their relationship, the good, the bad, the ugly, whatever, and let them reminisce. That is so invaluable to a widow because people don't give time and attention very freely these days. Part of that, part of listening is to hold space for that person. This is really hard for us as human beings, and even sometimes for me, even being professionally trained as a life coach and a grief coach, sometimes it is awkward and uncomfortable when that person is crying, when that person is letting the emotions out and they're getting through it. One of the things they taught us in grief recovery is not to hug a person, not to touch them, not to basically make a physically interact with someone because it disrupts their train of thought, right? It disrupts where they are in the moment. And so that's awkward at times, right? Because what do we want to do? We want to wrap them in a big old hug. We want to pat on the back and say, "It's going to be okay. It's going to be okay. I promise it's going to be okay." But to truly hold space for someone is to, I call it sitting in the suck with them. Okay, Simon Sinek says it much better. He had a video calling and he called it sitting in the mud with them. And that's when you see somebody, they're down in the mud, they're really having a rough time, they're just in despair, they're sad, they're awful, they're going through it. Instead of you trying to pull them up out of the mud, is that you sit down in it with them. You're just there and you just let them be in their feelings and be in their thoughts and be in their emotions. And as awkward and as uncomfortable as it is, and the tears are flowing and they're snotting everywhere, you might pass them a Kleenex, okay? But you're not trying to pull them out of that. You're sitting in it with them and you're listening. And as much as you can treat it as normal as possible to do that because your confidence to do this for them helps reassure them that they're not making you uncomfortable. So the more that someone can confidently say, "Let it out, girl, let it out. Cry it out. Let's hear it. What else? What else? Tell me more. Tell me more." The more that somebody talks to me like that, the more I feel like, "Okay, yes, let it out." Versus if someone's like, "It's okay. It's gonna be okay. It's gonna be fine." I feel like, "Okay, I need to dry it up." I need to stop. Another component of listening and being present is to validate them. And validating is, essentially one of the hardest things to do. I practice this as a parent, and as a parent, this is super hard at times. But validating them is essentially affirming and assuring them about their feelings, about their thoughts. When they're saying, "This is so hard, I'm never gonna survive this, my life is over," that you're not saying, "Ugh, your life isn't over, you're gonna be just fine." Okay, that's not validating somebody, that's the opposite. But you might say, "Oh, this has to be so painful, I'm so sorry, I can't imagine how awful and how painful this must feel and how hopeless it must feel to feel like, what is the point?" You're validating what they're saying, and that helps them feel heard. That also includes things like not giving them advice unless they ask for it. Widows get all kinds of advice unsolicited, and the closest thing I can relate to that is if you've been pregnant or you've been expecting a child or you have small children and everybody wants to give you parenting advice, and you're just in one ear and out the other. You don't want to hear it. You didn't ask for it. You don't want to hear their advice, okay? Unless you ask for it. So they don't need your advice. Remember, we're not here to fix. We're not here to make them feel better. We're not here to pull them out of the mud and the muck and the suck of it. We're to be there, to listen, to hold space, and to validate how they're feeling, even when we don't agree with it, even if we don't agree that what they're saying is accurate. Okay. Our job is not to fix. A widow will feel loved if you just keep showing up. So, this is just to reiterate, if you take nothing else away from our time together today, nothing else, this one thing, keep showing up. And I put this little message at the bottom. Thank you for not giving up on me, because I've said it to so many of my friends. And I just want to share with you what it's like for a widow. So, when I first lost Nathan and my world was turned upside down, as it is for every widow, right? And I'm getting all these texts and messenger messages and cards and like all this stuff coming in, right? How are you and the kids? How are you? How are you? How are you? And I was copying and pasting updates. Like it just felt like I just sat there and copy and pasted updates to everybody. It was exhausting. And I was in survival mode, right? Like I wasn't thinking clearly. I wasn't getting back to everybody. I wasn't responding to everyone. I wasn't able to, handwriting all the thank you cards. It was just all exhausting. It was all this noise. And on one hand, I felt very loved and cared about because all these people were reaching out. And on the other hand, it just felt like this mountain of stuff that I needed to do. Like, oh, this person texted me. I need to text them back. Oh, they sent me flowers. I need to write them a thank you card. And I finally was like, I can't anymore." And for 98% of people, I just wouldn't respond. And I just couldn't. The water was here, and I was trying to figure out this new life, and I was trying to figure out how to survive and how to take care of my family and what was our new normal and our new schedule, and they're going back to school and I'm having to travel for work and all of these things and responsibilities, and I just couldn't respond back to all the people. And it was really shocking to me how many people, my family, my friends, like the people I thought who would be there for me the most, didn't take long for them to die down and go away. But then I had a couple of people who I really wasn't that close with. I'd gone to church with them like years ago when I lived in Ohio. I live in Arkansas now, like states away. I went to church with them for like a year or two. And to this day, every holiday, every birthday, every anniversary, they're sending me cards, they send me flowers, they send me gifts. Keep showing up. And for the first probably, I don't know, almost a year, I might have said thank you once or twice. I might have let them know I got what they sent me. But I'll tell you now that I'm 2.5 years out, I tell them all the time, thank you for not giving up on me. Thank you for showing up and showing up and showing up and sending me cards and letting me know. And it was never without an expectation that they were going to get praise, that they were going to get a thank you, that they were going to get whatever. In fact, one of my friends that I'm still close to today because of this, I told her, like, I'm sorry, I can't be a good friend to you right now. I just can't do it. I can't do it. You're not going to hear from me. I'm not going to reach out. I probably won't remember to tell you happy birthday. It's not that I don't love you. I just can't. I can't. And she was like, that's okay. I got you. I'm here for you. And she kept showing up. She was a bulldog. Okay. This woman is a bulldog. And I have told her, I've talked about these people on podcast. I've written these people thank you notes, and I've told them so many times, thank you for not giving up on me. I didn't have the bandwidth then to tell you thank you, so I'm telling you now. Okay, so what are some things that come to mind when you think about, okay, someone lost a spouse recently and you wanna help them? They're a widow, you wanna help them, you wanna give back. What are some things that come to mind that you can do to help a widow? Like, what are some of the first things that come to mind? Just type that in the chat for me. Or what are some things that are maybe common knowledge that people do for someone who has lost a spouse or someone who's grieving or hurting? What are some common things that people do? Go ahead and type that in the chat. I'm going to give you just a minute to do that. Okay, taking them food. Yeah, that's very common. Listening to them. Yeah, that's good. Mow her lawn. Yes, very good. Yeah, good. Good ideas. All right. So, common ways. Oh, I love this. Allow them the freedom to be themselves. Yes. Take her to dinner. I love it. I love it. Okay. Common ways that people tend to help widows. And I'm not here to bash the food train or bash the frozen casseroles. Okay. Hey, I love a good casserole. But that's like the first thing that people tend to think of, right? Is like, oh, let's take food, let's organize food. And in many ways, that's super helpful because then that person doesn't have to cook, they don't have to worry about it. Sometimes it is challenging if they have picky children who are picky eaters. But for the most part, that is a nice gesture. They tend to send flowers, and we tend to call, message, or reach out to people. And we tend to say, if you need anything, let me know. Like that's one of the common things that we tend to hear. So, how, though, can you be a super helping hero? So, how can you rise above these things that are typically done and do more that is super helpful? So, the first thing that you can do is, first of all, decide what you can do and what you'd be happy to do. Okay. So, I, will mow someone's lawn. I don't mind to do their laundry. I don't mind to clean. I don't mind to cook. But there's things that I wouldn't necessarily be happy to do. Like, I don't want to clean dog poop out of a yard. If I'm being honest, I would do it. I wouldn't be like excited to do it. But think about what it takes to run a house. And if you're struggling with some ideas, don't worry, I got you. I got a whole list. Okay. We're gonna get there. But think about what you can do. And as you go through this list, it'll give you lots of ideas that many widows have weighed in on that they said they wanted help with. Okay. You can decide what you're able to do, you want to do it, you're happy to do it. And then you're going to make a very specific offer with a date or time. Okay. So, what happens is if you say to a widow, if there's anything I can do to help, let me know, you're actually putting a burden on that widow. It's shocking, right? Like, you don't think of it that way unless you are the widow. But if you put that on a widow, now the widow has to think, okay, what do I need help with? And remember, they're not thinking clearly. They got all this brain fog, they're in survival mode, like they're just trying to get through the day. They have to remember who offered to help. They have to remember or think about what they need help with, which some days that's a struggle. Then they have to think about, okay, can you do that? Am I comfortable asking you to do it? Would you be happy to do it? And how bad am I going to feel if I ask you to do it and you say you can't, or you're going to be out of town, or you're unable to do it? Oh, I don't want to ask you to do it. I'm just embarrassed. I'm embarrassed. I should be able to wash my dishes. Why can't I wash my dishes? I can't ask Sue to wash my dishes. That's embarrassing. I'm a terrible mom for not washing my dishes, right? Like, these are all the thoughts that are bouncing around in a widow's mind. Okay, so when someone says, "If you need anything, let me know," then for many widows that I know, we just kinda write that off, like, "Oh, well, that's nice of you to offer, but you're never gonna hear from me." Okay? So, what you can do is make a very specific offer of what you want to do, including a date and time. And this is going to be a little assertive, right? So you're not really going to ask if you can do something. It's more about asking if that date works for that person, like saying, I'm going to help you with this. I'd really like to help you with this. Does this day work for you? Okay. So, one thing my neighbors did, if you remember, I told you I was in the bed for like 2 to 3 weeks with this COVID and double pneumonia. Nathan was in the hospital. It's summertime. What do you think's happening in my yard? What do you think is happening in my flower beds and in my fields? The grass is growing like crazy. It's to the point it needs to be brush hogged down in the field, okay? So, one of the best things my neighbor texted me was, "Hey, we're gonna come mow your yard and brush hog your field on this day. Does that day work for you?" And I was like, "Whoa." I thought I I hadn't even thought about the yard, to be honest. I didn't care at all at that point, and I thought for a moment like, "Oh, well, maybe I could call someone. I could hire someone, like, my neighbor shouldn't have to mow my yard, that this isn't their fault." But then I thought, "Well, gosh, they said they could do it on this day, and then it would just be done," and it sounds like they've already made up their mind, like, they wanna do it, they're willing to do it, they're happy to do it, they can do it. Why not just say yes? So I did. I was like, "Sure, that day works for me perfect." Um, so your goal is to make a very super specific offer with a date and time so that it makes it easy for the widow to say yes. Okay. So if you say, uh, hey, I would love to do your laundry for you. I can come over next Tuesday or I can pick it up and take it. Does that day work for you? Then the widow can go, oh, well, Tuesday is really not a great day. How about Wednesday? They don't feel like they went out of their way to ask you to do it. You already said you were gonna do it and you're happy to do it. Or they could say, "You know what? I'm good on laundry, but if you could take the kids to school for me that day, that would really help me out a lot." So, being very specific with what you're gonna do, when you're gonna do it, makes it easy for the widow to tweak your offer a little bit. It makes it easy for her to say yes, harder for her to say no. And make your offers in a way that are very gracious and have care in mind, okay? So, say you wanna pick up groceries or you wanna drop them off. Well, for me, I don't want people coming in my house, maybe it was a mess. I have 4 kids. What do you want me to say? Okay? Maybe my house is a mess. Maybe I haven't washed dishes in a while. Maybe I haven't showered in 3 days. I mean, who knows, okay? But especially for me, I didn't wanna see people. I wanna be left alone. I wanted to hibernate. That is how I cope with things. That is how I get through them. And I didn't want a bunch of people coming in and out, right? So if you're going to offer something like doing the groceries or mowing or whatever, just reassure them like, I don't have to come in. I can drop the groceries on the porch and leave. You can come out and get them whenever if this time works for you. But do it in a way that gives them a lot of privacy and respect that if that's something that they want. So here is part of the list that I have for you, and you're going to get a link once this event is over. I'm going to email you a link to where you can download this if you don't already have it. But this is part of our long list of ideas of things that you could actually do for widows or things that they want that would be helpful to them. So, what I typically suggest widows do, so if you are the widow, first of all, if you need some ideas, here's some great ideas, okay? And then if you may want to go through and check the box on which ones, like, what are you comfortable having someone else do for you? Like, I'm comfortable having someone scrub my toilet. Sure, okay. If you want to come clean my house, that would be amazing. I am not comfortable with someone washing my underwear. Okay. So for me, maybe I'm not checking laundry, but house cleaning, like, yep, I'm good with that. I'm comfortable if someone wants to take my kids out to do something fun, but I'm not comfortable if they want to decorate my house for the holidays. Okay. So, which by the way, it is almost Christmas time. So, decorating for someone for the holidays, shopping for them, wrapping their presents for them, taking their kids out for them to buy them a present or buy them presents for each other. Those are amazing ideas right now of things that you could do, especially around the holidays. What are things that you can buy? I always recommend disposable plates, cups, silverware, toilet paper, Kleenex, because no one wants to be doing dishes while they're grieving, okay? So if you're looking for ideas of things to buy, whenever people ask me like, "Oh, this person just got a loss, I wanna take them a basket, what can I take?" I'm like, "All the paper things, all the disposable things, just please, just take that." Um, but these are ideas of things that you could do, and we have a section for learning a new hobby or engaging in new things because as a widow has lost her person, she feels like a different person, and she's trying to figure out whether or not she still likes the same hobbies, she still likes to do the same things, but she also may want to try some new things, and maybe there's things on here that you like too, that you could invite her to, you could take her to, and that would make it less anxious for her because then she knows somebody who's there, she's not doing it by herself, and she's kinda testing out some new hobbies, so again, you're gonna get a link to that list so you can have that. So here are some examples of ways to present your offer to her of how to help, okay? So remember, you're gonna pick something very specific, and then you're gonna say something like, "Hey, I'd love to mow the lawn for you next Tuesday. Does that day work for you?" You're not gonna say, "Hey, I noticed your lawn's really overgrown and needs to be mowed. Do you want me to mow it for you?" Okay. Like negative helpful, don't do that. Hey, I know Mother's Day is coming up. How about I take your kids out shopping to give you a break and they can pick out a little something for you? That'd be amazing. Hey, I'm gonna drop some groceries off tonight. If that's good, I can leave them on your porch and then I can go so you don't need to let me in. Oh, awesome. And you can also offer, this is maybe a little better version of if you need anything, let me know. But you might just be curious, like, what are some things, like, what are the chores that you hate doing? What are the things that are just driving you crazy? You wish you didn't have to do. And as they share that with you, then evaluate, can you take those on? Can you delegate them to someone else? Can you do anything to help make those tasks a little bit easier? All right. If you want bonus points, then you could be their liaison. So you could coordinate help for them. Okay? So maybe you can't do it all, obviously, but you know that they need help. So you could be their person that is like the go-between. So maybe you're sending out the text updates of how the family is doing and what they want everyone to know. Maybe you could do things like they need to notify the credit card companies that their spouse has passed or died. Maybe you could do that for them. You know, you could rally the troops and organize a food train. You could find somebody to mow the lawn, find somebody who's willing to do the dishes, find somebody like you really could be that funnel and that liaison for them because then that allows them to not feel so burdened with the task, but then also not be in an awkward situation where they have to be the one asking. And if you are the widow, then you should consider assigning someone to be your liaison. Like, who is that person? You know, I feel like most of us know someone who's bossy or take charge or, you know, they like to be getting stuff done or they like to be in control of things. And they would just be delighted to be this person for you. Like, oh, we need to get you some help over here. We need to organize some stuff for you. And I'm going to find somebody who can do this. And obviously, you want it done in a professional way. Like, you don't want all your business blasted out on Facebook, but you know who you could trust or not to be this person and to just help coordinate things for you. A lot of times, someone will love to do this for you if they just knew it was okay and what you're comfortable with getting help on versus not. Okay, if you are the widow, why should you let someone help you? Okay, listen, I know it's hard to accept help. I know it's almost impossible to ask for help, so I'll give you that one. But if people offer to help, these are all the reasons why you should let them. First of all, you need help, okay? And sometimes I wonder, even for myself, if it's a pride thing, an ego thing. But what is the reason why it's so hard to accept help? But if you accept help, it reduces that pride and that ego, right? We feel a little more humble when we're willing to accept someone else's help. And it keeps you from being cynical and just bitter about things, right? Like, oh, nobody helps me. Where's all the people at that said they were going to help me? Everybody's forgotten about me. Like, it's easy for your brain to tell you that when people in the best way they know how have offered to help and you've basically rejected them or said, well, okay, no, thank you. So it helps you from a mindset perspective there. People won't always be able to help. They won't always have the time. They're going to have busy periods of time in their life, and it makes them feel good and useful. Like, it makes you feel good when you can help someone else with a problem, with a challenge, with something like you feel useful and like you actually did something to help. It makes you feel good. So by you not letting them help you, you're taking away the opportunity for them to feel good about themselves, which is selfish in a way. It strengthens the relationships you have with that person. Grief is exhausting, and I have no doubt that one day you would pay it forward to someone else when you're at a point where you can help other people, that you will. The widow community is so generous and giving and amazing, and I have no doubts that you will pay it forward one day. And people aren't mind readers, right? Like, all the stuff that we've gone through, that we've covered today, they don't know. They've never been there. You didn't know either until you went through it, most likely. You didn't know. So let's give them a benefit of the doubt and help them out so they can help you out. All right. So now we're going to talk about platitudes. So what are some of the like common phrases and sayings that people tend to say to widows? What are some things that come to mind for you that you've heard often or that you see other people say often to widows? Go ahead and type that in the chat. Mm. I'm here for you. If you need anything, let me know. Yep. Okay. Yes. So those phrases and sayings, oh, I understand what you're going through, even if that I don't. Yes. We're going to talk about that one specifically, actually. All right. So instead of saying, I give you some ideas here. All right. So on the left are things that people commonly say, and on the right are suggestions to replace that. And we're going to talk about why. So the first one is everything happens for a reason. Well, that's zero comfort to people, honestly, and that doesn't help them in that situation. And to me, some of these sayings are our way of soothing, of trying to fix, of trying to pull somebody up out of their sadness. And, instead you could say something like, um, well, let me back up. Sometimes people would say to me, everything happens for a reason, or this is all part of God's plan, or, um, well, now at least, whatever, right? And trust me, I've done a ton of praying, I've done a ton of soul searching. I have wrestled with these questions and these concepts for what feels like a lifetime. And what I've come to realize, or what has been revealed to me, is none of this is God's plan. Like, God did not create the world and human life with the idea and the thought of death and sickness. Those things came into the world later. So we live in a broken world. Death and separation was not part of God's original plan for human beings. Okay. And we know we live in a world of free will, that people make choices, that good things happen, bad things happen. And so sometimes bad things just happen, period. Sometimes it's just bad. It's just bad. It happened. Sometimes that happens. And we don't always know why. I don't think that God wanted Nathan to die so that I could go and help other widows. I don't think that. So, what we can say to someone is sometimes bad things happen and we don't understand why. We don't. We could why and what if ourselves to death, but I'm here for you. I'm here to walk this journey with you. It's amazing. Things like they're in a better place. I used to get bitter about this one because when people would say, "Oh, at least he's in a better place," I would say, "Well, good for him. What about me? I'm here. I have to raise these kids. I have to pick up the pieces. I have to be sad that he's having a great time. I know where he's at. He's in heaven, cracking jokes, making people laugh, having the time of his life. Well, hooray for him. Now I'm the one that has to be here picking up the pieces and figuring out how I'm going to survive the rest of my life without him. Hooray for him." Okay. So those are things widows think don't always say. So instead, you could say something like, I know it must be really hard not having him here. I know this must really hurt and be hard for you. You'll find someone else. Okay. Well, I don't want anyone else. You'll you'll find someone else. Well, okay. That doesn't replace the love I had for that person. That doesn't change the fact that he's here and maybe I don't want to find someone else. So instead you could say, you were really blessed to have the love that you shared. I'm sorry. I know how you feel. So this is one that got brought up. I know what you're going through, or I know how you feel. And here's one thing that I learned that was super helpful as part of the grief recovery method. So even if even if you are in a very similar experience, right? So, as a widow, we all know what it means to be widowed and to have lost our spouse. But in that umbrella of widowhood, there's a ton of different scenarios, all those different uh, unique situations, all those unique challenges, all those things were so different. And even if someone has a super similar experience to you, like their spouse had COVID and had pneumonia and went to ICU and was put on a ventilator and went through all of these things, at the end of the day, our relationship with our person is very unique. So even in those most close circumstances where you feel like, I know how you feel, or I understand what you're going through, at the end of the day, you don't know how that person feels because you don't know the ins and outs of their relationship and the dynamic of their relationship with their person. And telling them, I know how you feel doesn't make them feel better. So instead, you can say, I'm sorry. I can't imagine how you feel, but I'm here to listen to you. And even as from one widow to another, because we do understand how widowhood changes us and how it affects us, I don't pretend to know exactly how another widow feels. That's why I don't compare pain. I don't compare grief. Like pain is pain. We're grieving. It doesn't matter, you know, we can't really try to compare and say, well, I'm grieving more than you, or my situation is harder than yours, or easier than yours, or whatever. Like it's widowhood. It sucks at times in the beginning. So I know how it feels to lose a spouse, but I don't know how it feels to be in your exact shoes because I've not been in your exact shoes before. And so I'm not going to pretend like I know exactly how you feel, but I know it hurts and I know it's awful. And I'm willing to listen and I'm willing to understand the best I can how you feel. Another one, you're strong, you'll be okay. I heard this one a lot. I think because in my work environment, I was such just a like strong, independent, you know, force at times and just very resilient that I heard you're strong a lot. Or I would hear things like, you have to be strong for the kids. You have to be strong for the kids, right? And what I wanted more than anything was for someone to look at me and say, "You know what? I really admire your strength and I admire your resilience because I don't know how you do it. Like, you're so strong and it's just so amazing to watch. But you don't have to be strong around me. And if you just need 5 minutes to not be strong and not have put on a face and not be holding up the world for everyone, then let it out. Just tell me how you feel. Tell me what's going on. I just wanted somebody so bad to tell me, "You're strong. You don't have to be strong with me." Time heals all wounds. Well, that is not accurate. Time compounds what is. So if you're in the process of healing, then over time, time compounds that healing and makes your healing stronger. We invest money in the stock market. Time compounds the interest and time compounds the amount of money that's in that investment in the stock market. There are people who do not want to heal. And there are people who stay stuck in the pain, stuck in the grief, stuck with where they are. And so time's only going to compound more of that. So time on its own does not heal wounds. That's why when you break an arm or you have an injury or accident, you go seek help. You don't break your arm and just leave it flopping around and say, well, time's going to heal all wounds. I'll just wait. I'm just going to wait for time to heal this thing up. Time compounds what is. So when your arm is broken and you go and have surgery and it gets put in the cast and it gets aligned and it starts to heal, time is going to compound that healing. It's the same thing in grief. A lot of people don't understand that. So you can say to someone, I understand it takes time. I understand you need to take time to heal. And that's what my friend said when I told her, right? Like I can't be a good friend to you. I'm sorry. Like I see what you're doing. I know you're trying to be there for me and I am not being a good friend back to you and I don't know if I ever can be. I'm sorry. And her response to me is, that's fine. I'm here for you. I'm going to wait as long as it takes. I care about you. I know it takes time. I know it's not something easy. That was your whole life. Like, I get it. I'm gonna be here until the time passes that you can get to a better spot. And that's so powerful. If you ever find yourself starting a sentence with at least, just stop, just cancel the rest of your sentence. Just don't even say it. At least diminishes the pain, the suffering, the emotions, whatever it is, right? So someone says, "Well, this happened," or "This is my thought," or "This is my experience," and we say, "Well, at least it wasn't this." Like, okay, yeah, that was bad, but at least it wasn't this bad, or at least now you'll be able to experience whatever. At least diminishes their experience, their words, their thoughts, whatever it is they just said. So before you say at least whatever, ask yourself, are you trying to soothe, to reassure, to fix? Because that's typically what happens when we start a phrase with at least. All right. So, in being there for a widow, one of the most powerful things that you can remember is oftentimes widows want to be heard, they don't want to be fixed. And I'm just reiterating this because it is so hard. It's hard for me. I know this. I know this. I know this. I know this. And it's so hard for me not to want to comfort someone, to tell them it's going to be okay, to cheer them up, to get them out of a place where they're hopeless and it feels like things are pointless. And it's hard not to want to fix other people when they're hurting because you care about them so much. But it's just a good reminder that the way you help people is by listening and being there and holding space for them and not fixing them. All right. So I have a question for you, something to consider. So you could put your answer in the chat here. How long could you keep showing up for someone and giving? Maybe that's text messages, maybe it's sending cards, maybe it's sending gifts, maybe it's inviting them to go out and do things. How long could you keep doing that without ever receiving a thank you from them? And I don't expect you to be perfect. So just put your honest answer in the chat. How long could you keep doing this? Because when I asked myself this question, I was like, oh, wow, I don't think it's really that long. Before I was a widow, it definitely was not very long at all. It might be like 2 or 3 invites, and if someone kept saying, "No, they're not coming. No, they're not coming," I'd be like, "All right, well, forget it." Um, if I was sending someone text or leaving them sticky notes or something like that, I mean, I feel like before widowhood, I could have gone a good 3 to 6 months maybe without ever receiving a thank you, without ever receiving an acknowledgement, just like sending love just one way, just one way all the time without ever getting it back. How long do you think you could do it? As long as it takes. Oh, well, Sue, you're amazing. I know you're amazing because Sue's in our community. She is a lover and a giver. But I thought this was an interesting concept because I'm like, how often do we show up for people? Do we invite them? Do we do nice things for them? And like, we're looking forward to like the thank you or like the hey, I got that package you sent me. Oh my gosh, that was so thoughtful. Thank you so much. Or, you send a text like, "Hey, I was just thinking about you and I appreciate you," and all of these things, and you just can't wait for them to read it because you know it's made their day better, and they're gonna be like you're waiting for them to respond back and say, "Thank you," or, "This really helped me," or whatever. And I really had to question myself, like, how long could I keep doing that one way and just, like, never hear back from the person, never know, really, are they getting what I send? And it's funny because I have had people send me things over the years and be like, "Did you ever get that?" So, I know it's not just me, but I think it is a really good reflection point because a lot of times in widowhood, our support and our help disappears. And it's very common that the first few days, weeks, maybe even months, we get a lot of support. A lot of people reach out, a lot of people send messages, and maybe even up to the first year. You have people that remember what happened on Christmas, they remember what happened, and they may send you messages that they're thinking of you or whatever. But after that amount of time, then you're looking around like, where did everybody go? Like, I haven't heard from anyone, or no one is saying that they're ever thinking of me. And that can be incredibly isolating for a widow. And often, this is what I hear from widows, especially after this period of time, is that they feel forgotten, they feel unseen, abandoned, lonely, alone. Like everyone's just moved on with life. And even though it's been a year or two later, they're still really struggling. They're still hurting. They're still wrestling with this grief thing, and people have forgotten about them. And so it's so powerful for a widow to keep showing up. Yes, months later, years later, keep showing up for them. So here are some ideas of things that you can do, especially after the initial first few weeks and months when they have a lot of support and you're doing a lot of things for them. These are some days that typically mean a lot to widows and that change drastically for widows. And some of them are ones we don't really think about very often. So their birthday, so often their spouse is the person that may have coordinated a birthday party or gifts or just something to let them make that day special for them. Their spouse's birthday is typically important. Their wedding anniversary is another day. Things like Mother's Day and Valentine's Day. A lot of times, like Valentine's Day, obviously their spouse may have done something for them. For Mother's Day, if they have children, then maybe the father used to, take the kids out to get something for mom or get a card for them from them to mom. Um, and then the big ones, right? Christmas, New Year's, Thanksgiving, 4th of July. Other ones that may happen are really important holidays and dates that tend to be forgotten by other people. And so even if you just put a reminder on your calendar, even if you um, track it on a spreadsheet, whatever is easiest for you. But even just texting them to let them know, hey, I know Christmas for you may be hard this year, and I'm thinking about you. Or, hey, I would like to do something for you on this day, on the birthday. Or, hey, I know your spouse was really a big supporter of this nonprofit. And so I wanted you to know I donated X amount of dollars to this organization on their birthday in their memory. The point is to help keep the spirit of that person alive for the widow and to keep them very much a presence because they are afraid that people will forget about their person. They'll stop talking about them, that it'll be something that happened in the past and we just, we kind of move on, move away from that. But these are ideas of things that you could do um, to help keep that person's spirit alive and to help honor and acknowledge widows that are going through some of these different days. So whether it's a card, a random text message, you do an activity together, you go on a trip together, you try something new, or maybe it's a holiday or it's some sort of event and maybe you reserve a special chair for their person. Um, Grief Box has these really nice, like, almost like wreaths with a place for a candle and a place for a picture of their person, and you could set that at the table, or you could just, put a ribbon around it or put a candle there or something just to basically say, like, "We're holding space for this person, and we're incorporating them into this event." Like, that would be really special. All right, so some additional things to consider for longer term support or for some unique challenges. We talked very briefly about the person who's an anticipatory griever. So the person whose spouse received a terminal diagnosis, but they're still here. And one of the biggest things that I hear from these folks is, when they're the caregiver, they're often overlooked. And of course, this isn't malicious, right? But when your spouse receives that terminal diagnosis, they get a lot of attention. They are the primary focus, and as they should be. And at the same time, it's exhausting as a caregiver to be at the hospital, to go to the appointments, to coordinate all of that, to still work, to balance the kids, to take care of things around the house and take all of those responsibilities on, to wonder, is this really going to happen or not? Do we have a chance or not? As I shared earlier, a lot of these scenarios, the caregiver and the person with the terminal diagnosis, they may still just be holding on to hope. I mean, I can't even imagine being in that situation where you want to hold on to hope, but you also want to realistically consider what's going to happen if that person does die. You can offer to help them with things just like you would a widow. They'll probably have a chore list a mile long, and they're exhausted and they're trying to figure all this out. So, whatever things were on our list to help a widow, you could help this person with things around the house, chores, errands, helping with kids, pets, whatever that looks like. You could encourage them and the person with that diagnosis, if possible, to leave messages for their loved ones, to make a video, to write a letter, to leave a message for their person. Believe it or not, a lot of people don't do this. And so they end up wrestling with regret that they had 6 months or 5 years or whatever together, and they never took the time to have something like that where they have messages that they could leave behind. They never talked about what life could look like after that person passes. Do they expect their spouse to date again, not date again? Will they live in the same house? Will they have to, downgrade their housing? Will they have to make changes in how they manage the kids? Like, what will life look like? Because not having this conversation up front makes it much more difficult for that person later, and knowing, well, what did my person want and what did we expect? And there's such a peace that people have when they have had those conversations that others don't necessarily have the opportunity of having. So those are all really good conversations to have with someone who's grieving from an anticipatory perspective, or even for newlyweds or people who are married that don't necessarily have a diagnosis. So some suggestions, if you're part of an organization that, like a church or a workplace, and you have people who are married. I saw a statistic the other day from Modern Widows Club that said 7 out of 10 women will become widows. 7 out of 10 married women will become widows. So if you're a woman and you're married, there's a 70% chance that you're going to be the one who's widowed. And us widows know that we do not culturally help prepare people. So if you are here because you help widows, or you're part of an organization that does support widows and wants to support married people, then these are some great things that you should be encouraging them to talk about now, so that they won't regret them later when they're in a situation of being widowed. So things like having a will, a trust, having life insurance, discussing funeral arrangements, what the future will look like, what financial decisions they're going to make, what decision they want to make for life support, how long they want to be left on life support, if they want to be resuscitated. What are some messages that they could leave behind for their loved ones? Taking more photos, videos, the small things will become the big things later on. And as a widow, even something as simple as planning out the funeral. There were many decisions that Nathan and I talked about. I felt super confident, like, "Oh, yeah, he would want this, he would want that, he definitely would not want this." But there were other things that we hadn't talked about. Things like, do I bury him with his wedding ring or not? And even though that seems kinda simple and like, I'm the one here, I should be able to make the decision, I really wanted to honor what he would have wanted. And because we hadn't talked about that, I wavered back and forth and back and forth. I really got hung up on this until the day we did bury him. And so even something that seems minor like that, because there's such a desire to honor and love and cherish our person, we wanna make we wanna have those discussions so that decisions we make later on become much more simple, much easier, and we can make those decisions much more quickly. So encourage people who are in a relationship or married to have all these discussions now. And in the future, when one of them become widowed, then they will thank you for encouraging them to have that conversation. I just want to briefly mention before we get to the end of this discussion that some widows really wrestle with feeling guilt, feeling guilty about how things were, guilty about their relationship, guilty for a lot of different things. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time covering these things, but I wanted you to be aware of them, that that is something very normal and natural that happens with grief, but it isn't something that they should live with. So encouraging them to work with a support group, to work with a coach or a therapist or someone who can help them with their healing and their grief process will really do wonders. So just know that this is something normal. A lot of people have guilt associated with grief, but they don't have to live with it. And that is definitely something that they can heal through. Okay, phew, that was a lot of information. And I wanted to make sure that I could at least give you a basic understanding of what widows go through, how you can actually help them, and some nuances and some things to consider for the future. I think we got all of that covered, and I want to make sure that I also have time to share with you about the Brave Widow community and how I can support you, or how I can support, or how I do support people who are widowed long term. But before I dive into that, I want to make sure that I have time to answer some questions that you may have about topics that we've gone through, or what to expect as we go forward. So I'm going to give just a minute and let people in the chat go ahead and type your question, and remember to put it in that Q&A box there at the bottom of your screen. I'm just looking over at my chat screen here. Just go ahead and type your question or your topic in the Q&A box, and I will make sure that I get that answered for you. And if there's anything that, I have hit everything, I believe, on what was entered on the forums and what was entered here in the chat, but if there's anything else that comes up for you or that you were hoping I would cover that I didn't, then feel free to put that in the Q&A box as well, and I will get that answered. All right. Give you a minute to type that in. I see a question or two popping in here. All right. How do we access the list? Okay. So as soon as we're done here, then I am going to upload this video. And as I get it uploaded and I get the link set up, then later today you'll receive an email that'll have the replay of this video, which you'll have access to. for 7 days if you're not part of the Brave Widow community, and you'll also have the opportunity to download, the list of ways to help a widow, so you'll get that full list that you can download and that you can use, and you can copy it, you can share it, it's totally up to you. I'm also gonna give you access to, ways to honor your loved one. It's a little mini course that, you if you've signed up through bravewidow.com/free, you actually have access to that course already. But you have access to that and a workbook for ways to honor your loved one because it has so many ideas in there beyond ways to help widows. This is really ways to keep your person's spirit alive on a daily basis. It has ideas for the holidays, it has ideas for big milestone days. It has like over 50 or 60 ideas, very specific ideas of things that you can do to help keep your person's spirit alive or to help a widow keep their person's spirit alive. It was so many ideas of things that I wanted to make sure that you had access to it. So you have access to the course, you have access to download the workbook that goes with that, that lists out the ideas and gives you a space to write down which ones resonate the most with you or with the person. And so you'll get the link. All of that will be on one web page. You will get that later today. I will get that sent out once this video gets uploaded and it's ready to go. So you'll have access to that and you'll have access to that for 7 days. And if you are part of the Brave Widow community, as I know we have Sue with us. She is part of the Brave Widow community. Then she will have unlimited access to it. So she'll always be able to go into the portal and access it. And that's one of the benefits of being in the membership community. So, any other questions? Mostly comments. This has been very helpful. Thank you. Great job. Thank you. Awesome. Okay. Well, what I would like to do then is to tell you about the Brave Widow community and extend an invitation for you to join us. Because unfortunately, I can't cover everything on this webinar workshop, even though it was essentially almost 3 hours now and we'll be done within the 3-hour time limit of this workshop. There's just so much I would love to be able to help teach, equip, and empower you with, and I just can't condense it all down to a workshop, even if it's an extended workshop like this one. So I would love to be able to continue to support you and help you and in the membership community. And because as a life coach and a grief coach, I help people make decisions, and because I like when people take action, I have a fast action bonus for you today that I'm going to share with you in just a minute. But first, I want to tell you a little bit about what the membership community is. So, as I shared with you at the beginning of the call, when I was first widowed, all the information just seemed really overwhelming. Like there were different Facebook groups you could join. There was information about what to do and how to do things online, but it was all disparate and kind of all over the place. And I felt like there wasn't one good hub and location of a strong community that was focused on the future, that was focused on hope, that was focused on rebuilding life again. There are a lot of good groups out there, but I felt like it was difficult to find one that was focused on that and hosted live calls during the month. So I host at least 2 calls every single month with my Brave Widow members in the community, and they get coaching. If they have questions, if there's something they're struggling with, they get real-time coaching then. We have different activities that we do together, and we have open discussion where people share updates of what's going on in their life, and they share things they're excited about, they share things they're struggling with. It's a wonderful, very supportive community. And I also have courses in the community. So if you want to learn more about a particular course or a particular topic, then there may be a course in there for that. So this one course that you're seeing here in the middle is an example of how to make friends. Like, how do you make friends as an adult? Is there an easy app for that? What all can you do? How can you rebuild your social network? So there's no order you have to take the courses in, but they're available. They're a la carte. Just take them whenever works best for you and learn more about how to do things like make new friends and join our forums where you can talk to other widows and you can share about you. You can share about things that's happening in your life, and you can meet and build relationships with other widows. It's just really an amazing, amazing environment. And so here's the view of everything typically that's in the community. We have the 5 courses, which I'll go through in just a minute. We have the 2 live calls every month where you get to learn things. There's activities usually. You connect with other widows. You can get real-time feedback through group coaching. And there are resources and tools in there that you'll actually use, like the checklist and like the workbooks that I'm going to share with you. And then for people who sign up today to be part of the membership community, I am offering a fast action bonus for people who do take action for a one-on-one personalized coaching call with me, where I am going to hold space and carve out time specifically to talk with you one-on-one, to walk through where you are in your journey, some of your biggest struggles and challenges, and we will identify some next steps for you. We'll identify the next thing that you can do or focus on. I will help you take the time to do that. And I'm only offering that to people who sign up from this live event, who sign up today, because I like to encourage people who take action and who make changes to start making a difference. So to join the community, it's $47 for 1 month, or if you like to save money, then it's $70 for the quarter. And the way you get there is bravewidow.com/join. If you sign up for the quarterly rate of $70, you'll save 50% off of the monthly rate. So I like to also reward commitment, and that's why we offer a discount for the quarterly rate. So we'll tell you a little bit more about the courses in the community. If you have questions about this or about any topics that we have talked about, go ahead and type that in the chat. And I want to tell you about some of the courses that are in the community here. So we have the Making Friends and Meeting New People course, where you're going to learn how to make friends and meet new people. Even if you're an introvert like me, even if you hate small talk like me, even when your whole social circle has abandoned you and you're not good at coming up with things to say, whatever that is, yeah, I'm going to teach you how to make new friends and rebuild your social circle. That was so key for me in my healing journey. It really was. All right, we also have a course on how to navigate brain fog. So if that's you, you're in brain fog, you need this course. It will help you streamline, organize things, and help you feel like you're not drowning anymore. I will also have a course in there on setting goals. So how in the world do you set goals while you're grieving? When you're overwhelmed? When even the smallest of things feels so incredibly big? How do you do that? I'm going to teach you that. Getting unstuck from grief. So I have a live event here in almost an hour where I'm going to walk through this live, but it's actually a course in the membership community that people can access at any time. Ways to honor your loved one course, I talked about that. You're also going to have access to some of the events that we've had with other experts. So I did a session with Alexandra on freedom from burnout and overwhelm. I did a session with Laura Sinclair of Flourish Organizing on how to declutter your home and when is the right time to get rid of your spouse's things. We also recently, with Elaine Roth, had an open Q&A for her as a widow, now published author. How do you publish a book? How do you write while grieving? How do you juggle work and kids and writing and all of those things together? She is an incredible resource for answering those questions. And then future workshops are included at no additional cost in your membership. So, how to actually help a widow? This course is going to the membership community. And in January, we are going to be starting a Love Post Lost and Dating as a Widow series workshop, which I'm very excited about that. I get asked about dating and see tons of questions about dating and all of the landmines that are involved with that. So I'm really excited to be offering that course soon. So again, to join the membership, it's bravewidow.com/join. And if you sign up today, you do get that one-on-one personalized coaching session with me. And I'm going to help you identify the next best steps that you can take to move forward in your healing journey. I'm just going to check the Q&A and the chat one more time to make sure there's not any other questions. And with that, I will thank you for joining me, and I hope to see you soon in the community.